about 10 billion rands on debt service costs, we will then be able to divert those resources to other pressing needs in the country because, for example, we had a revenue shortfall of 22 billion rands. The other issue which we feel is important is that you cannot embark on a proper infrastructure-led growth without addressing the governance challenges that we experience at SOEs. In the past, when we doled out money to SOEs, we never really actually made sure that there was consequence management in the event that the conditions which were put in place were not met. Now, in order for you to improve capital formation, fix capital formation in the country using SOEs in a developmental state model, you need to make sure that SOEs are functioning optimally. Now that there are quite a number of political parties around the table, I'm sure we're going to have a frank discussion about those issues and make sure that they happen indeed, because you cannot reignite growth without addressing those fundamental challenges in the economy.
All right, thank you so much, Ngabayomzi Kwangwa from the UDM. For more reaction, we cross over to Nombu.
Very much. I'm joined by SARS Commissioner Edward Kiswita. Of course, one of the things that came out of the midterm budget policy statement is the fact that revenues are going to be about 22 billion less than was anticipated in the February budget. To get a bit more comment on this, I've got the Commissioner with me. Thank you so much, Commissioner, for joining us. Just tell us about why we're seeing that revenue underrun, so to speak.
Well, first of all, I think the three main areas that are performing lower than expectations is individual payroll taxes. The second one is largely fuel levy, and the third being import VAT. And all three are connected to economic factors. So, for example, in the budget estimate, there was an assumption that the wage bill would grow by 8.4% and that we would add 32,000 net jobs. Whereas actually, wage bill has only grown by 5.4%, and the jobs are lagging. We also see a higher level of retrenchments and job losses. In terms of fuel levy, there's good news and bad news. The good news is Eskom is performing more consistently, hence the 250 days that we've already had without load losses. But also there's been rooftop solar that has replaced some of the generation, and the net effect is that we have a significant, almost 11% reduction in the consumption of fuels. The fuel levy will grow as a result of three things. Firstly, if there's a rate increase, and the Minister has kept that flat. Secondly, if there's a volume increase, and there's been a significant decline in volume. And thirdly, if there's a price increase, and the price has not really had a big adjustments. So huge revenue loss as a result of fuel levy. And thirdly, imports are down. When the estimate was done, the assumption was that imports would grow by 1.9%, and actually it has contracted by almost 3.5%. So there's a huge swing of almost 5.5%, and that then knocks on to all of the import taxes. So we've seen a significant decline in in import VAT and in the customs duties. Thankfully, that 22 billion would have been much higher had it not been for a better than expected performance from some of the companies, particularly those in the financial and other sectors.
Commissioner, I know the Finance Minister touched on the impact of the two parts on the revenue. What are you seeing, what are you expecting for the end of 2024?
So I can report that as of this morning, we've already had just over 1.6 million applications to whom we've issued a directive, and we're very proud that we're able to issue a directive in an hour, because all of the thing has been put on online and with our software behind it. So it's been able to give a really, really good turnaround time. The value of the total directives that we have approved amounts to just over 29 billion rand, and the taxes that will be levied against that will be about 7.2 billion. But none of that money is in the ministers' in the September numbers yet. And also, because we are withholding debt that taxpayers owe to us, we expect a further 750 million rand of old debt will be collected through the two-pot. So I think so far it appears as if the withdrawal rate is higher than it was originally expected, but we don't believe that the income tax revenue that will result from the withdrawal will be enough to replace the losses that we have seen because of the economic performance.
Commissioner, we're going to leave it there. More people to speak to, but thank you so much for your time. That was SARS Commissioner Edward Kiswita, just giving us an overview on why there is a revenue underrun and also what SARS is benefiting from in terms of the two-pot system, somewhere in around the tune of 7.2 billion rand. Could be a bit more, including the debt that people owe to SARS. It's over to Bulelani.
Thank you so much, Nombu. Of course, we're still continuing to take political reactions here on the floor of the Precinct of Parliament. Joining me now is DA leader John Steenhuisen. Firstly, let's go to the Government of National Unity. Did you have any influence in how this mini budget was drafted?
Well, of course. I mean, we've got a Deputy Minister of Finance who's been working very closely with Minister Gondongwana in this. But I mean, I think it is a collective reflection of the priorities of the Government of National Unity and a good precursor to the medium-term development plan that will come out in January. And I commend Minister Gondongwana for the right diagnosis, but now also giving us the right remedy for that diagnosis. And I think that I'm very excited about us taking these first tentative steps onto a new path of fiscal responsibility and hopefully growth and jobs for more South Africans as a result thereof.
Government debt remains a headache for the Finance Minister. Are you happy with the plans that he's come up with in terms of addressing this debt?
Yes, absolutely. And I think you're going to see if we meet the targets, if we maintain the discipline, if we keep the fiscal and anchor that debt, then what we're going to be able to do is to see debt to GDP at around 70%, which is similar to our peer countries, by 2030. And I think that's where we need to be targeting. We cannot continue with runaway debt. I'm also particularly pleased that we're moving from consumption spending to spending on investment and in infrastructure that's going to return greater income for South Africa. And of course, as a Minister of Agriculture, delighted about the interventions around structural reforms on rail and also on the Cape Town port. Very, very important for the agricultural sector of the country.
Is there something for the poor in this budget framework, given the high cost of living in the country at the moment?
Well, I think you're going to see that in more granular detail when the medium-term development plan comes around. We've already been speaking about mechanisms to reduce the cost of food and the cost of living. It's got way too high. But remember, growth is the rising tide that lifts all boats. And the biggest beneficiary of that growth will be poor South Africans who are unemployed, because the more growth you have, the more jobs you have, and the more people get into employment, and the more people you lift out of poverty. And so the growth agenda, the growth and jobs agenda, and the anti-poverty agenda has to make sure that we have to maintain discipline on that path to be able to make sure we hit those goals. We have to get more people into work. The only way we do that is getting our economy running.
All right, thank you so much, John Steenhuisen, the DA leader. For more reaction, I believe Nombu is standing by on the other side. All right, we're going to continue to bring in the political parties. I've got ATM leader here, Violetu Zungula. From the ATM's perspective, are you happy with the minister's presentation?
Very, very underwhelming. You can't have a minister that will admit that we've got a problem of revenue generation, but offers nothing tangible on the in terms of providing solutions as to how we're going to generate revenue. We've got illicit financial flows in the country that are costing the fiscus billions, but he does and says nothing when it comes to that. We've got a problem of illicit trade in our country, whether it is alcohol, it is tobacco, but it does nothing when it comes to exploiting that. We've got a problem, or we've got a more than 500 billion township economy in the hands of foreign nationals, but it does nothing when it comes to going after the traders there in terms of getting taxes there. Again, he says that there's a problem of job creation. Jobs are not going to fall from the sky. There needs to be a change in terms of government policy so that we've got manufacturing-driven initiatives, because consumerism will not create jobs. It's only manufacturing that is going to create jobs. Again, he spoke nothing about being deliberate and intentional on shifting government spending from big business to small businesses, because we know that the small businesses are the biggest creators of jobs. But if you look at the nature of our country, more than 80% of government spending goes towards big business. Less than 20% goes to small businesses. Small businesses that could create jobs, that could grow the economy, and that would alleviate the country, because many people now are dependent on social grants. And if we are born now, what is happening? The grant recipients are increasing. The budget cuts are there when it comes to the other departments, but there's no focus to say, and the people that are paying the taxes are getting lesser and lesser. So there's no focus to say, how then do we get more people to pay taxes? By making sure that they've got jobs, or have more businesses paying taxes, by making sure that you've got a lot of businesses that are operational in the country. So it was a speech whereby the minister is just admitting we've got a problem, but is offering nothing in terms of solutions.
All right, thank you so much, Violetu Zungula from the ATM. I'm going to bring in Labour Federation COSATU. Matthew Parks is the national spokesperson. Matthew, is there anything for the workers in this mini budget?
Look, it's a mixed bag. I think it's a business as usual budget, and I think for us we had hoped really to see a business unusual approach. We have an economy struggling at 1% growth. We have a high unemployment rate of 42%. We have struggling municipal and public services, SOEs, and there was nothing really new in the budget that's going to change the scenario. We do want to appreciate there are some, reinforcement of home affairs. There's some disaster relief. There's an additional increase for SOD grants. Those are good things. There's been good work around rebuilding Eskom. We've ended load shedding, but we did not really see much new that's going to grow this economy, that's going to reduce unemployment. And for us, that's quite a disappointing approach.
I'm sure you're always looking forward to hearing this word, government wage bill. The pronouncements by the finance minister, how does it sit with you as COSATU?
What he said there is that the wage bill is not out of control. That fact has decreased from 35 to 31% of the budget. What we're worried about is that government is taking a simple approach of freezing vacancies, allowing the wage bill headcount to decrease further, and that's going to lead to more pressure on nurses, on teachers, on doctors. It's going to spark a further brain drain of skilled workers in the public sector to better paying, less stressful jobs in the private sector or overseas. We really had hoped for a much more aggressive approach to grow the economy, to create jobs, to generate the revenue the state requires to fund public services. But simply saying, well, cut is going to make things worse, not better.
And lastly, social relief measures. Are you happy with that?
So he hasn't made any adjustments to it. The adjustment to the SOD grant was the one which was adjusted just after the last budget. But we do hope in February that we'll see inflation adjustments, and we'll see a roadmap for the SOD grant to be transformed into a basic income grant. So it's a mixed bag. There's some good parts, there's some worrying parts.
All right, thank you so much. Matthew Parks is from COSATU, giving us the workers' view on this mini budget. For more reaction, I'm going to cross back to you, my colleague, Nombu.
Right, of course, that is Bulelani Philip and Nompumelelo Siziba getting us a reaction there following Minister Enoch Godongwana's mid-term budget policy statement by the Finance
Minister, for joining us. So you've delivered the midterm budget. A difficult balancing act for you, but I think the key thing that came through is really the focus on infrastructure and creating an environment that is conducive for private sector involvement. Just expand on that for us.
Let me just say the key thing, even we are talking about debt or anything else, our major problem in South Africa is a growth problem. So we've decided to dedicate and devote our attention and shift the composition of expenditure towards infrastructure investment. And in that, facilitating more growth in the economy. That's precisely what we're talking about. Then we've developed a number of products which are going to help the private sector to participate. Triple Ps in particular, we're going to change the framework in such a manner that it does not take that long to do a triple P. Secondly, the budget facility for infrastructure, which helps all the projects which need fiscal support. We're going to open a number of windows and move faster in that infrastructure. And second, we're going to provide a different blends of guaranteed in support for infrastructure, whether it's a build to operate and transfer, whether some kind of guarantee.
I see that you've put up some funds to create a situation of voluntary retirement from the public sector. Tell us a little bit about that and how confident you are around this current wave of public sector negotiations that are taking place, given that the fact that the employer-employee are not yet meeting minds.
There are two things. The early retirement is outside the current negotiations. It's an issue we are going to table separate. We've agreed with unions that we must table separate. It must not be part of the negotiations. But we are quite confident that the incentive package we've put with it will be attractive enough for people to take the early retirement. Insofar as the wage negotiations are concerned, I think more than any year in my experience, they're progressing very well.
How concerned are you about, a lot of social formations are talking about teachers, not enough teachers being available because of budget cuts and so on. But on the other hand, you say that you still provided more for things like education, health. How are you getting the balance right in this regard?
Yeah, let me take you a step back. In October last year, I cut budget, including for education, in October last year. There was an outcry. In February last year, I reinstated those budgets, all right? Which means the outcry is no longer founded because I've reinstated those budgets as they were. The problem is, once it gets into the equitable share of a province, it's a province that decides where the money goes. It does not have to necessarily have to go to teachers.
But what about the municipalities? I mean, they're a huge problem. A lot of them are failing and not functioning properly. What's the plan with those?
That's the fundamental point we're raising, is that the municipalities are key center of delivery. In fact, they are a face of government. If the municipalities are failing, therefore people revolt against government because of that failure. They think that it's government that's not performing, whereas it's the municipality they face. We think that there must be a concerted effort to make sure that we reform how the municipalities function.
So you've decided, you talked about it before, tough love a couple of years ago when it comes to SOEs, and you seem to be keeping with that vein. But it sounds as though Transnet needs a lot more capital than it's managed to tap on. So how are you going to resolve that situation? I know that you're pushing the PPPs, but even then you're only bringing out the municipal PPP document in June of next year. I mean, people are frustrated.
Transnet is not a municipality. Let's distinguish between those two. Let me just say, Transnet, I gave them a 47 billion rand guarantee, not a bailout, it's a guarantee. They've got to perform and pay for it. So as far as I'm concerned, that's where am I with Transnet. I'm not discussing any further details at the moment.
Okay, no, that's fair enough. And just lastly, Eskom, are you satisfied with their progress? And I understand that you've held back on the amount of support you were giving them before. You've held back due to them not necessarily fulfilling all the conditions. Can you speak a little bit about that?
When I give money, it's always conditions attached to it. If people don't meet all the conditions, I then impose sanctions, which I've done to Eskom. I've taken 4 billion rand.
4 billion rand. Otherwise, how do you think they're progressing?
They're progressing now, but not at the pace in which we would have required them to do. But I think there's an improvement in their performance and their finances.
All right, sir, I'm going to leave it there. More to ask you, but I think we'll leave it there. Thank you so much. That was the Finance Minister, Enoch Godongwana, speaking to us, giving us an overview on a number of subjects, including the public sector wage agreement, which he says he thinks is progressing well. Economists have flagged public sector wages as a potential threat, if not, struck at the right level. But with that, we're going to hand it over to Bulelani.
Thank you so much, Nompu. Of course, again, we are continuing with political reaction. Joining me now is IFP Chief Whip Nhlanhla Kgatebe. Thank you so much, sir, for your time. You are part and parcel of the GNU. Are you happy with what your partner has delivered here today?
As GNU partners, we are very much welcoming to the medium-term budget policy statement that the Finance Minister was delivering today. We believe that there is quite a number of positives that we can draw out of it. Infrastructure was mentioned as being reprioritized. The Minister again allocated 2.1 billion for disaster relief. We also had commitment that out of 70% of municipalities that had applied for debt relief were approved. We think that that is quite substantial in taking a step forward as the government of national unity.
But does it address the crisis of unemployment in the country?
Well, the crisis of unemployment is very much worrying, and the government of national unity is locked up in the boardroom to look at ways and means to alleviate the escalating rate of unemployment in the country. We are quite aware as the IFP that it is in fact worrisome for all of the citizens of this country.
Thank you so much, Nhlanhla Kgatebe from the IFP. I'm going to call now Minister in the Presidency. Sorry to disturb your conversation, Khumbudzo Nchavini. Basically, this mid-term budget from the ANC or from government side, does it take us to the right direction in terms of dealing both with economic growth as well as job creation?
It does. It's from the government perspective, it does. Remember, we collectively, and I serve also in the Ministers' Committee on the budget, so we collectively said what is the growth trajectory we are looking at, what are the priorities we are looking at. We are looking at the priorities for job creation and also for reducing the high cost of living in the country and growing our economy. So where we are, what we prioritize, the infrastructure investment for one, it's a direct investment on initiatives that will create more jobs, but also grow the economy. And linked to that is the procurement bill that has been passed, that's going to come into effect. That allows us to then ensure that in that procurement processes, SMMEs and local communities can then benefit from this big infrastructure project. And linked to that is the new regulation on the PPP arrangement, the public-private partnerships. The regulations are going to make it easier and quicker to make sure that we then unlock the investment in infrastructure and other major projects. And additionally, he spoke about the infrastructure fund, the BFI, and unlocking the next round of the BFI now, because we are very committed to that, because we think the growth of infrastructure and the development of infrastructure in the country is critical, not only for the economy, for the jobs, but also for the economy to function. Remember, the projects he has mentioned the work we are doing on the freight and logistics, getting back the rail lines, getting the ports to work, and those investment, the big investment that is making to ready ourselves for the NHI, but the big investments that we are making, the unlocking of the the Sanral project pipeline to the value of 85 billion rands because the GFIP, the Gauteng improvement plan debt issue has been resolved or is being resolved in a matter. So we are confident on that. And secondly, the other issue that we are confronted with is how do we then manage our debt vis-a-vis the spending that we need to spend on the economy, on growing the economy. And as indicated that the debt servicing costs are going to stabilize in 2025, 2026 and then start to decline. Why is that important? It's that important because the money that we're utilizing to service the debt can then be redirected into other service delivery initiatives. So for us, it's a great budget and we are ready for the expenditure and the rollout.
Just lastly, Minister, there's a crisis of crime in the country, mass shootings, extortion. Does the Finance Minister have additional allocations to fight crime, particularly in rural areas?
Yes, so we manage as the Justice and Crime Prevention Cluster, we've worked on a strategy of dealing with crimes. That's why you're seeing the turnaround in terms of when the crime happens, the response rate and the ability to arrest has been very quick. We would prefer a situation where those crimes are not in. That's why we're using intelligence-driven operations so that we can get to the root of it. And we're starting to develop what is the pattern of that. You have got stock theft issues that are coming up in the Eastern Cape in particular. Majority of these incidences are that. You've got others that are related to family disputes that you deal with. And we have, in the organized crime rate, we have been moving very consistently in dealing with those. That's why the heists, cash and transit heists are very much reducing. Then when we have a special fund which is called the CARA, where the monies that are recovered from criminal activities are then availed for the criminal security cluster to utilize in critical priorities. And we augment that. In addition to the budget, we apply for the utilization of those funds to deal with the crime situation. We are confident we'll get a handle on the situation in the Eastern Cape, we'll get a handle of the situation in KZN, like we got a handle of the situation in Limpopo. We are also going to stabilize the situation in Northwest and also Gauteng, which are the major hotspots. And you recall the Minister of Police engaged with the communities in the Western Cape on how to deal with the crimes of drugs and all those things. And we are getting a handle on that situation.
Thank you so much, Minister in the Presidency, Khumbuzo Ntshavheni. Of course, we're hoping you get more General Mkhwanazis in the police force. All right, Nhlamulo Ndlela, I'm going to ask for a second from you. Please say we are live on 404. Okay, I'm going to give you an opportunity. I just want you to give you one opportunity, just your reaction on this budget, please. All right, cool. It doesn't want to talk to us at this stage, and of course, that will bring us to the end of this special broadcast of the midterm budget policy statement. On that note, Unathi, it's back to you in studio.
Thank you very much, team. Of course, as Bulelani said, that does indeed